Guess let's start with the story of how you two met, because you guys are the ones that started this whole family. I don't think I know how
Oh,
you
I
guys
remember the day, the night. It was a Sunday night at the Church of God in Kenosha, Wisconsin. And I was up in the choir. I was getting ready to start church. And all of a sudden, coming through the right side door was these two older women
met.
and this gorgeous, pretty young girl. I couldn't take my eyes off of her. So later on, we found out that it was Ruth Ann Morgan from Union Grove, Wisconsin, bringing her mother and her aunt to church because her aunt had had an accident. That was the beginning of my life. That's all I have to say.
The reason that I was bringing my mother and my aunt to church was they drove from Union Grove to Kenosha 2 times on Sunday, once on Wednesday night to go to church. Driving into Kenosha one time, Cassie had an accident with her car and totaled it. Didn't have a car. They were determined to go to church that night. The only person that Daddy would let drive his baby blue Ford Galaxy was me. So I was going to a little Baptist church in Union Grove, but instead I put them in the car and I drove them to Kenosha to the Church of God, and that was it. That was where we met. All because of an accident. But was it really?
Papa, how did you propose to Nana?
It was on New Year's Eve night in front of our house at
2112.
2112 Horeb, Zion, Illinois. I sent my sister into the house. She always went on dates with us.
She was always in the back seat.
And I sent her in, or I told her to go in the house. And I asked Ruth Ann Morgan to marry me. The next morning, I was scared to death. She spent the night with my sister, Sharon, which they were best friends, and I was scared.
He was like, what did I do?
But she said yes. I think that's what scared me.
How did you feel, Nana?
Oh, I was pissed off.
Nana?
The next day, after he'd asked me to marry him, and I had said yes, he never said a word. He never mentioned it. He never said, wow, you made me so happy. Nothing. He did not even acknowledge it. As far as I was concerned, we were engaged. But I wasn't real sure what he was thinking, or if he was even thinking. So yeah, I was ticked off with him.
I was thinking, I was just scared.
So when was it like official? You told people you were engaged.
Yes, we told,
When?
When was it?
Well, I was scared to death to tell my folks.
Because you were young?
Because that wasn't the plans they had for me. Especially my mother. My dad, I found out later, didn't want, I was good in school.
Mm-hmm.
I was number 4 or 5 in the class. And I had my honor, I had the whole thing. But Daddy didn't want me to go to college. You've got to understand, this was in the mid-60s. We graduated in 64. And there was a lot going on the college campuses. And he just felt that if I went away to school or I went to college, he would lose his girl, his little girl. And you also have to understand, this is the man that when he walked me down the aisle to get married, I looked over at this big tough guy and tears were dripping off his face. And when he sat down, Darlene and Cassie and them who were sitting behind him told me later, he cried and sobbed so hard that the whole pew shook while the ceremony was going on. So he didn't want me to go to college. So he wasn't as upset about it as my mother was. Even though she wanted me to go to college, she didn't help me to prepare for college. She didn't go to colleges. She wasn't interested in the colleges. So once we told him, Daddy was very happy.
Yes. And the way that we told him was a Sunday. I would go over to Ruth Ann's house every Sunday, and especially through the football season, to watch the Green Bay Packers play with Harry Morgan. And we had it planned that this one particular Sunday, I had to ask Harry Morgan and tell him that I had asked Ruth to marry me.
Oh, so you did it backwards.
Yeah,
And
as most things in life.
so we went there and we sat, and Harry and I were in the living room, and Ruth and her mother was in the kitchen area, and all of a sudden Ruth would come in and she'd look at me and I'd shake my head, and she would go back in the kitchen, and another half hour, 45 minutes would come by, and here she would come again, and I would shake my head. So about 15 to 20 minutes before we were supposed to leave for church, I figured, man, I got to do this, So I said, Mr. Morgan? He said, yes. I said, I got something to ask you. He said, I know. And I said, well, I've asked Ruth to marry me, and I said something like, if you say okay, I'll make sure she has everything she wants. And he says, you better not. And he said, because you can't give her everything she wants. So I said, well, I'll do my best. And he said, yes, that he would permit Ruth to marry me.
That's very sweet.
Yeah, that was it. That's how it happened.
Papa, tell me about the Band-Aid on your finger during your wedding.
I got a new job. I was out of high school now, and I worked for a National Food Store, and I was promoted full-time into the meat department as an apprentice. And the first day on the job, I nicked my finger, and that was the first week, that was on like Thursday or Friday before we got married on Saturday. And I forgot to take the Band-Aid off. And that's where it's in all of those pictures of me with a Band-Aid. She didn't do it, I did it.
And he was so nervous the day of the wedding. He called the house, and I think it was either Bertha or my mother that answered. And he said, I put a rod in the car. And they're like, okay. Well, I just thought, Ruth Ann, I put a rod in the car. And what he meant was he had put a clothes rod in the back of the car if I wanted to hang my clothes up. But he just never made that too clear.
Wedding day jitters.
Oh, yeah.
What were you feeling, Nana, on your wedding day?
In a way, and this is going to sound very strange, but you have to understand what it was like in my house back then. Bertha and George, of course, had come for the wedding. And so the family was together. And that's the only time that family had a good time, is when they were there. So in a way, I was looking forward to it. We knew a lot of people were coming. The church was packed. There were people standing out on the porch of the church, people down the steps. It was the biggest wedding they had ever had in that little church. I was excited, but a part of me was feeling that I was going to miss out on some family times, which didn't happen that often. But it was a good day. It was a good day.
What were your thoughts when you saw her walking down the aisle, Papa?
I'm sorry.
What did you think when I walked down the aisle?
Oh, there was an angel coming down the aisle. I mean, totally an angel. Everybody's eyes teared up. Mine especially. Leroy, which was my cousin, and he was there at the wedding. He teared up, and he was one of our bridesmen. And on the way to the service, I went with Leroy, and he drove me to church, and he was a kind of a smoker. And I remember this one thing. He opened up, took a new pack of cigarettes out of his pocket, unwrapped the cigarettes, threw the cigarettes out the window, and he was holding on to the wrapper and going down the road. And oh, where's my cigarettes? And he threw them out the car window. That was funny. And then we got to church. We were both nervous. Yes.
Oh, it's cute.
I remember after the wedding, I didn't feel that you should make your guests wait. They were your guests, and things were done differently then. So we went right from having the ceremony to the reception. And after the reception, we went back to the church, and that's when we took our pictures. After the people were gone, they'd been fed, that type of thing. And I can remember everybody was laughing and having fun. Now, there was no alcohol whatsoever at our wedding. This was a 1964 Church of God wedding, no alcohol. And the photographer is taking the pictures, and he said, he said, I never had such a happy group of people, especially when there wasn't a dab of alcohol anywhere to be seen. He said, you all are having a good time. And we did.
Now, am I remembering correctly that you guys took your honeymoon down south? Or was it a year later?
It was a year later. We were scheduled to go down south. We were going to tour the Smokies, do that kind of thing. We had a little 1964 Volkswagen Bug that we were going to go down in. And the morning after the wedding, it had been a strenuous time for me, emotionally, physically, preparing for the wedding, because I did everything by myself. Bertha was in Washington, D.C., and I really had no one to help me. So I did everything by myself. And I woke up that next morning. I was exhausted. I could not begin to think of driving for 12 hours to go down south in a Volkswagen Bug. So what we did, nobody really knew we were home. And we stayed in our new apartment. And we did things in the area. We went shopping. We went sightseeing. We just did things in the area. And then the next spring is when we took our trip down to Alabama to visit his grandma and his grandpa on both sides. And we went into Chattanooga to visit Carolyn and Ann, his aunts, and had a wonderful time then, much more so than if I had tried to make it the day after the wedding. I just couldn't do it. I was too tired. I was just worn out. But we had a good time.
Yep.
Isn't there some story from that time, like with bugs or something? Or
Oh my God.
Papa?
Oh.
His grandparents lived side by side, and they had a little drive that went around. And if you spent breakfast with one, you had to go have lunch with the other. If you spent one night with one, the next night had to be with the other. And they both tried to please you, so you can go from there.
So this one night we were at my grandpa Underwood's, and we were getting ready to go to bed. I mean, down there at that particular time, when it got dark, it's bedtime. It could be 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, or 6 or 7 o'clock. That's when you went to bed, because their lights were very small. They had very little bit of light.
No TV.
No TV, things like that. So they had their bedroom in the front part of the house, and the second bedroom was in just behind theirs in this little area. And my grandmother, doing the best she knew how to do, because it was a very warm, muggy day, and she had the window open. Well, they had no screens on the window.
And they had the light on for us.
And they had the light on for us to go in.
In the bedroom, over the bed.
To go in. So when we went in to the bedroom to get ready for bed, it was pretty well covered with bugs. Flying bugs. Insects. And Ruth was very scared of bugs. So I reached down and I pulled down the cover, and that was okay. And then when we turned around and got ready for bed, and we turned back around, it was covered with bugs. So we shushed them off, and we got into bed. And I would say, I would take my hand and I would touch her, and she would thought it was a bug, and then this type of thing. And then we both started to laughing and everything.
In other words, he was aggravating.
Yeah.
Just so you know, that was aggravation.
And all of a sudden, I heard my grandfather. He said, "Luler," that was my grandmother's name. "Luler, what are they doing?" We were swishing bugs.
And you were aggravating me.
So taking it back a little bit, Papa, I know you were born in Alabama, right?
Yes, Double Springs, Alabama.
Houston.
Well, Houston, but Houston, Alabama is a very small town, maybe 250 people.
And Double Springs is not?
And Double Springs had, twice that much. And that was the county seat. Double Springs was the county seat of Winston County. And that was a little county north of Birmingham, Alabama, and a very small area.
Now, your grandmother was Justice of the Peace.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
His grandmother?
yes,
Ahead of her time.
yes, she was very progressive. During the Depression and that, she went out into the countryside and taught all these little wives how to raise a garden for food for their family, how to prepare and can that. She was very active, and he'll tell you about his grandpa, I'm sure, before this is over, because that's just an important part of his family history. But after he tells you, remember this, that she would hitch Grandpa up to the plow. They had a huge garden, and he was blind, and she would use him to pull that plow through the garden with her guiding it. Well, when he was born, she was the one that filled out the birth certificate. We did not even notice or know for years and years and years that she put down that he was born in 1945, but when she signed it on the bottom, she put the year was 1946. So we're not real sure if he was born in 45 or 46, because Grandma just had two different names on there, two different dates on there. But she was an important woman in that county, very progressive, very much ahead of her time. And when he tells you the story about his grandpa, remember this, that those two people never went on any kind of public aid. They raised 3 girls, and they raised them on their own guts, their own independence. He was just an amazing man. Grandpa was the most amazing man I think I've ever met.
Well, Papa, you want to talk to me about your grandpa?
Grandpa South was, like Ruth said, was amazing person. He was tall. He was probably 6'2", 6 something like that. They had 4 daughters. They had 2 daughters. My mother and her oldest sister was, when they were little, my grandfather, they lived outside of Birmingham, Alabama, and he worked in the coal mines. His job in the coal mines was picking coal. In the morning, you'd go in and pick coal. Well, the night before, the people that would blast the coal went in and they would blast the coal so that the pickers could come in and pick it. And they had this one particular person that was supposed to go in and pull out all the dynamite caps in the mines to make it safe. Well, this particular day, my grandfather was very strong, very
In his 20s.
in his 20s, very strong person, and he went in and he was picking coal. The third pick that he threw, it hit a dynamite cap and it blew up in his face. blew his eyes out, cold in his head. He was in the hospital away from Grandma for, I don't know, a year or so. And they thought he was going to die, but he didn't. He came back stronger than ever. I can remember him sitting out beside the shade tree, and he was sitting there the day that I brought Ruth down to meet them. That was a year after we got married. And I walked up there and I said, Papa, I said, this is my wife, Ruth Ann. And he said, come here. So she walked over there and he stuck his hands out and he filled her face, her nose, her eyes, her ears. And he said, now I know exactly what you look like.
A little bit of family history about Grandpa.
And that was the type of person that he was. He never forgot you. He would help. He made different things to sell from door to door, and brooms and stuff like that.
Chairs.
Wallets. He laced wallets. He did all these kind of things. He never, ever quit. And he was a great man, my hero, Yancey Self.
Now, when that accident happened, Grandma Self was pregnant. This is what I've been told. And she had a miscarriage, and it was the only son that they would have had. It was a little boy, and she lost the baby. And the other story I heard was that she had to have abdominal surgery at one point down in the summertime in Alabama, where it is so beastly hot. No air conditioning, no fan. And they were told that she couldn't sweat, that it would be very detrimental for her to perspire and get anything in those incisions. And Grandpa would sit up all day and night and fan her so that she could stay as healthy as she could and so she wouldn't leave him. So they were quite a couple. They were quite a couple. I loved them dearly.
Papa's hero. Talk to me about your hero growing up. I feel like I know already.
It would be my daddy.
Yeah.
He was a very, very intelligent man. I mean, he was smart. And it had been his dream to be a lawyer. He wanted to be a lawyer. He wanted to go to college. Well, the Depression hit. And his best friend Leo went into the Marines. Daddy wanted to go into the armed forces also, but he couldn't pass the physical. He had had TB, he had had different things. So he went to CCC camp, and you have pictures of the camp that he went to, Abby. You have the tents and that. And I don't know if these were destroyed in the fire or not, but I used to have the letters that he wrote home to his mom and dad. And he sent every dime he got at CCC camp to his mom and dad to help support them and to keep them going. Because back then, you didn't have the social network that you do now. I mean, for people to get money to pay their rent, to get money for not working, no, you didn't have it. You did without. And he's told when he was a teenager or a young man and they wanted to have a party, everybody would bring one ingredient. One would bring sugar, one would bring syrup. They'd bring one ingredient and they'd make candy, and that was their party. That was their get-together as young people, is they would each chip in what they could, and they would make an evening and have a good time together. He supported his mom. He loved his mom and dad. And I asked him one time, I said, Daddy, Grandma died in 52. And I said, Daddy, if Grandma hadn't passed away, would we have moved up here in 53? He said, not unless she would have come with us. He said, I would not have left her there by herself. And every day when I was in kindergarten, he'd take me by his mom's house so that I could sing the songs for her. I could tell her whatever I had learned in kindergarten. And I can still remember her. I can still see her face. And I have a picture of her. And she was special, and he loved her. And it wasn't until, he was gone, and Mom had given me all these family papers. And we had gone through them, and I found out she had been married twice before, which was unheard of back then. She had 2 babies before she had Daddy that both either died in infancy or when they were born. He was her only adult child. And the last thing, he was very, very, very conscious of being responsible for her. And I remember when she passed away and they brought her back to her home, to that little house. And the last thing that Daddy did before we left Southern Illinois to move up here, back then they made, or you bought, these concrete like bed frames. It was concrete, and it went around the grave, and then it had a triple loop headstone above it with the information on it, the name, the date, and that type of thing. And he went out in his garage. He couldn't afford to buy one. And he went out in the garage and he made 2 of them, one for his dad, one for his mom. And I went with him. I went with my daddy everywhere. And I went with him, and we took him out to the Ina Cemetery. David can show you how to get there. We went out to the Ina Cemetery, and he placed those homemade remembrances on their graves and told them goodbye. And when he passed away, and we went down there, after Daddy's funeral, Mother wanted to go to the Ina Cemetery. So we went out to the Ina Cemetery. And I can remember her, because she loved him. Whether it was reciprocated or not is unimportant. She loved him. And I can remember her bending over and pulling the weeds around Grandma and Grandpa's graves, cleaning up the graves. Tears were dripping, and she said, "Well, Mert," Grandma's name was Sarah Myrtle Morgan. She said, "Well, Mert, you got your boy back." And that's the last thing I remember her saying about Grandma and Grandpa. But Daddy he loved me, he protected me, he taught me, he played games with me, and he could give the best hugs in the world. And when he took those great big arms and gave me a hug, I knew there was nothing on this earth that could get through to me. I was safe. He was my safe haven. He was all I had.
Papa, was that intimidating meeting him for the first time?
No, not intimidating. He was a strong man. I kind of like to learn from different people, and I mean, I wasn't very easy to teach, I guess, but I remember times that we worked on putting the roof on the garage for them. And him and I were up there. It was like 100-degree day and just sweating like crazy, but we worked and we got it done. And when they moved into the new house, it was an old house, but I mean new to them, we went up and stayed in a little trailer for a week, and we helped him on that house. So no, he wasn't intimidating, but you did what you knew that you better do the best you could while you're working with him.
You know, 2 of the things that he taught me that come to mind. One time, I was in high school, and I had taken 2 or 3 years of Spanish. And they wanted to, it was a small high school, they wanted to offer another year. They had to have so many students, so they told me I had to take another year of Spanish. I didn't want to. I didn't want to take another year of Spanish. I didn't say anything. Went home and told my daddy. I said, "Daddy, they're going to make me take another year of Spanish, and I really don't want to." He said, "Well, then why are you doing it?" I said, "Because they told me I had to." He said, "Well," a few of his choice words, "that's ridiculous." He went to the high school, and he told them off, and he said, "My kid will take what she wants to. You can't tell her what she has to take as an elective." And they took me out of the class, and therefore, they didn't have enough students to offer it that year. But when he came home, guess what he did? He fussed at me up one side and down the other for not sticking up for myself, for not taking care of that issue myself. Well, time went on, family reunion. We needed a bag of ice for Old Settlers Park for them to make ice cream. And he said, "Go to the gas station and pick me up a bag of ice." So I got in the car and I drove to the gas station on the corner there, 11 and 45, and asked for a bag of ice. And they said, "That'll be $3. Well, I didn't know, so I gave him $3. Came back, and he'd given me a $5 bill, and he said, "Where's my change?" And I said, "Well, here." And I gave him $2. He said, "Well, where are the other $2? I said, "Well, the ice was $3. He said, "No, the blanket wasn't. It's $1 a bag." I said, "Daddy, they charged me $3. He said, "Get in the car." So I got in the car. He got in the car. He drove me back to that gas station, made me go in there with him, and he said, told that man, he said, look at her. And the man looked at me, he said, that's my kid. He said, don't you ever try and cheat her again. He said, now give me the effing $2 back that you took from her. And he gave him back. But he always demanded that we stick up for ourselves, that I stick up for myself, that I take care of the issue. Even if he was there to help me take care of it, I had to be a part of the solution. He was a tough preacher, but he taught me, and I loved him. Oh, I love that man.
Talk to me about your daddy.
One more daddy story. He was just the most important person in my life for so many years. But I remember when I was a little girl before we moved up here, so I had to be like 4 or 5. Spring cleaning was a big deal with my mother because she had to take down the coal stove, she had to wash the bed linens, hang them out, wring her washer, wash down the wall, get the coal dust out. So she'd send me to Grandma's house. Oh, Grandma loved me, and I loved her, and she always had pickles, and I loved pickles. So I went to Grandma's house, and Grandma let me have all the pickles I wanted. Then I went home that night, and I threw up. I threw up all over Mama's clean house, on her clean bed, on her clean linens, on the clean pillows, everything. I threw up all over it. Next day, Daddy goes to his mom's house. I said, now, Mom, he said, I love you. You're my mother. He said, I wouldn't spank you if I could. He said, however, the next time you feed her pickles, I will wear her out. And you know what? My grandmother would never give me another pickle. And she'd say, honey, Grandma wants to give you a pickle, but your daddy won't let me. And I'll always, always remember that. And in fact, Larry, this is the story I want to tell Terry's wife, Lynn, because she makes the best pickles I've ever tasted. And I want her to hear my pickle story.
So, based on stories, I know a majority of your family vacations were spent with that RV. And I've heard stories about Papa being up at the crack of dawn, driving the RV in his underwear.
True story.
Yeah.
True story.
What would you guys say has been your favorite family vacation?
Well, we did with Harry. Harry bought the motorhome, and we were paying some along the way on it, and he bought it to share with us. So we used it a couple times around here, short distance trips, just to learn how to use it and everything. So then we took off. We were going to go to Florida. I mean, that's a long way to go without ever driving a motorhome too far. So we get in the car, in the motorhome at like 3 a.m, and we pull out. It was in March, I believe, and we pull out and we head south. There's a big snowstorm had just come, and we had to dig the motorhome out, and we got on the road and got down to, my mom and dad had retired, and they moved to Tullahoma, Tennessee. So we got down and we stopped there, pulled into their driveway with the motorhome, and went in and visited and everything. And my mom is always a big Southern breakfast cooker.
As long as your dad cooked it.
As long as my dad helped her. And so she kept saying that, in the morning we'll have breakfast. I said, well, Mom, I said, what I'll do is, said, if I, said, we'll leave when we get up, and said, don't worry about cooking breakfast, and I thought it was the end of that. So we got in the motorhome, and everybody went to sleep, and I, had short pajamas on, and so I woke up about 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning, and this little Tracy, she woke up, and she came up and sat in the passenger seat, and I just took off down the road, and we were doing great time. So the next morning, Mother got up and she was fixing breakfast and everything.
Your
and
dad was making biscuits.
And Dad was making biscuits, and she was making the gravy and all this stuff for the breakfast. And then she said, Odie, my dad's name is Otis, but she called him Odie. And she said, Odie, go tell Wendell and them to come on in and have breakfast. He opens the door and he looks out and he says, Wendell and them are gone. And she said, what? I guess. And I had told her, and I was honest with her and everything, but I said, as soon as we get up, we're gone. You know, we woke up over by Atlanta, Georgia, and we got out of the motorhome and we had breakfast and everything. And then we get back, coming back, we stopped by there on the way home. And that's when we found out that we missed the breakfast.
You know, you were talking about him driving in his underwear, and it is true. We were going to Florida one time, and we decided that we would sleep in the motorhome. The kids were so excited. So we like, okay, we'll sleep in the motorhome that night, and that way when we, get up and have a bowl of cereal, we'll be ready to go. So the kids had double bunk beds. The kids were each in the bunk bed. It had a rear bath. It was a nice motorhome. It had a rear bath, and we're ready to go. And everybody's in their bed, and they're sleeping, and it's still dark outside, and I feel this thing swaying and moving, and I thought, what the heck? And I look, and it's like 2 or 3 in the morning, and Wendell is driving around Chicago, and he is indeed in his underwear, because he woke up, and he was ready to go, and he just got in the driver's seat, and he took off, and he drove around Chicago in his underwear.
Was that, in the 70s?
When did we get that? No, was it in the 70s or 80s?
That would have been...
Sarah Pooh was born.
Yes.
So she was born in 80. So it was in the 80s.
It was in the 80s.
Late 70s, early 80s that we started going with the motorhome.
Gotcha. So we're going to take it from your oldest. Tell me your favorite memory of Brian.
Go ahead.
I think probably the favorite remembrance of Brian was Brian was talented on the piano. He loved to play the piano there at times. He took lessons, and his mom taught him how to play some of the music on the piano, and he learned very quickly. And that was one of our favorite times, is just sitting and listening to him playing the piano and that type of thing.
One of my favorite memories, and I wasn't even I was present, but I wasn't present when it happened, was when he was born. We wanted a son so badly. And I got up that morning, and I knew I was in labor. And so we called Mom and Dad, and they came down. It was Sunday, and Mom had made a big pot roast Sunday dinner, and she brought the whole dinner with her. Well, I couldn't have a bite of anything to eat. So while I'm in the bedroom, in labor, they're at the kitchen table having a big Sunday pot roast meal. So went to the hospital. Back then, things in 64, he was born in 66.
Yeah.
In 66, things were very different about having a child. No one was allowed in the labor room. No, the grandparents were almost non-existent, but Mom and Dad demanded that they be in the waiting room. So they stayed in the waiting room while I was having him. And Mom especially would stand right on the doorway with her feet right on the threshold so that she could be the first one to hear what was going on. And they came out and they said Wendell would walk a few steps down the hallway after he was born, because back then you didn't know if it was a boy or a girl. And he'd walk a few steps and then he'd run. And then he'd remember he was in the hospital and he'd walk a few steps. And he got there and he said, "It's a boy." Well, about that time, they came out carrying Brian, and I guess the blanket was hanging down. And my dad thought that was all part of Brian. He said, "My God, how big is that kid?" And he was big. He was 9 pounds, 12 and a half ounces.
And here's another story on that particular time. I was working in the meat department at Sunset Food Store. The Saturday before.
National. You were not at Sunset.
Oh, I'm sorry, at
National.
National Food Store. And the Saturday before, I was cutting on the big bandsaw, cutting pork chops. And for some reason, my finger slipped behind the blade, and I came across my finger, and it cut the tip end of my finger off. So I had the emergency thing. I had to go to the hospital. They took a little patch of skin off my forearm, and they sewed it onto my finger. It was no big thing, but it was very traumatic at that particular time. They wrapped it up. The nurse that I had in the emergency room was very nice and everything. And we were talking. Well, the next day, Sunday, is when Ruth went into labor, and she had to go to the hospital, same hospital that I had been to the day before. We go into the delivery area, and the first nurse that came by was the very same nurse that was treated my finger the day before in the emergency room. And she said, "Oh my God, Wendell, did you scare her into labor?" And I still remember those things. And that was something I'll always remember.
Brian was 10 days late.
And he was 10 days late, so I possibly did scare her into labor.
I was sitting out, we lived in this long apartment. There were 5 apartments in this building that we lived in, and none of the women worked. And there was an apple tree out under in the back part of the lot, and we had a wonderful group of, we liked each other. We're all sitting, and we'd gotten our housework done that Saturday, and we're sitting there under that apple tree talking and laughing, and his car pulls up, and I said, "Oh my gosh, something's wrong. He's home from work. He shouldn't be home from work. Something's wrong." So I knew when that car pulled up that things were not right. They were not as they should be. And when I was in labor, they didn't give you anything for pain. They didn't give you an epidural. You just kind of made it on your own, or you didn't make it on your own. There was a lot of screaming that went on in the maternity ward. And I was bound and determined I wasn't going to scream. My daddy would have been so embarrassed if I would have screamed in pain. So Wendell was there, and just one time, I gave a scream, and I grabbed that finger, and I yanked that bandage and everything off.
Everything came off, yeah.
And they had only given him aspirin for pain relief. They had cut a piece of skin out of his arm. They had sewn it onto his fingertip and gave him aspirin to go home for the pain. So it was quite a delivery. But that's the thing about Brian. He made a big splash coming into the world.
Let's move on to your favorite memories of Tracy.
Want me to go first?
Yes.
Tracy and her father had a difficult relationship when she was a teenager because he aggravated her all the time. He would love to sing that song, "She's Got Freckles on Her Butt, She's Pretty." And she'd get so mad. Oh, she would just get so mad when he'd do that. She stubbed her toe one time. She was in the living room. She stubbed her toe on a table. Her father is down in the water room. "Dad, why did you make me do that?" And he hadn't even been in the same room with her. She did Princess House with me, and I was good at Princess House. I kept this family floating a few years with Princess House. And we had a beautiful large glass pitcher, and then we had a little pitcher that was just like the big one, and it was called the Son of a Pitch. And she came home one time and called her father the Son of a Pitch. And he said, "What did you say?" And she said, "I didn't say that. I didn't say the word. He said, "Close enough. Get in your bedroom." And he wore her out. But those are not my favorite memories. One of my favorite, and there are so many, but one of my favorite memories is we're sitting here at a table right here in this dining room. She had a boyfriend named Chris. Chris was a kind of a serious dude, but he was nice. And it was pouring rain. It was just pouring rain. And she's sitting here, and her father's sitting there, and I'm sitting here, pouring rain, and Chris comes. And he's standing at the window. And he's knocking on the window to get in, and Papa says, "Tracy, Chris is here." "Yeah, right, you just want me to get up and look." Now, rain is dripping off of this boy's hat, it's dripping off of his hair. And Wendell's like, "No, Tracy, really, Chris is at the window there. I'm not going to turn around. I know what you're trying to do. You just want me to look, don't you? About that time, Chris just took his hand and knocked on the window. And Tracy turns around. Well, why didn't you tell me Chris was here? that was Tracy.
One of the big things that I can remember too was when we moved into this house with the stairs, just going upstairs and everything. And Tracy, one thing you could not, she had to have the last word.
She's still like that.
Yeah, she had to have the last word. And so something went wrong, and I said, Tracy, go to your bedroom. Okay. And she takes off, and I said, I don't want to hear any words. No words, nothing. Okay. So I said, Tracy, going upstairs to your room, and I don't want you to say anything. I don't want to hear you say a word. So she goes all the way up 17 flights of stairs. She gets all the way up there, turns around, okay. She had to have the last word.
She was.
But that's okay. Another one of we used to always have Easter egg hunts here at the house. And when she was, after she had got married, and Amanda and, I'm sorry, and when she got married, and they came here for the Easter and everything, hunting Easter eggs, and we would go outside and hide the Easter eggs. I would, So I'd hide them in the tree and different places on the ground and up a little higher. And Abby was just
Amanda.
It was Amanda. Okay, Amanda had her Easter basket, and she couldn't find enough of the eggs and everything, and she was getting a little bit perturbed, and her mother was going to help her. So Tracy spotted this one up in the tree, and she kept pointing up to this in the tree. And Amanda was just looking around, and she couldn't see it, and she said, up in the tree. And Tracy's getting closer and closer, and all of a sudden the wind blows, and the egg falls out and hits Tracy in the eye. And that was another one of them, yeah.
The stinker of the family.
Oh.
Tell me your favorite story about David.
Oh, where do we begin?
Well, with David, he was terrific, but he liked to do different things outside and everything. So two different things. Well, this one particular thing, he went to church with the pastor's son and all these kids, and they had a party. And he went with them, and I said, David, I'll pick you up. And he gets over to this party, and John, that was his name.
John
Patakis was going. They called and said that they were going to bring him home. So they had the party, and then they was supposedly bringing him home. And I'm sitting here waiting for him to come home. And I fall asleep. And all of a sudden the telephone rings. And Lloyd DeTeam, which was the...
he was a friend.
Who was a friend.
And the police chief.
And he was at that particular time, yes, he was the police chief. And I get a phone call. And I wake up and I'm half asleep, and Lloyd says, Wendell. I said, yeah. He said, this is Lloyd DeTeam. Said, you know where Dave's at? I said, oh yeah, he's downstairs asleep. No, Wendell, he's not. He's over here at the police station. So what had happened is the boys, they were early teens, and they drove by the Jewel food store over here in town, and had this guy go in and buy them a pack of cigarettes. Then, instead of getting, caught or anything like that, they take the cigarettes and they go down to the down on the lakefront, and they're passing out cigarettes. David says he never smoked one.
Oh, well, bull crap.
But the police come by, and this is after curfew, and they pick them all up and they take them in because take them over to the police station, and to find why they're out that late. It was not very late. It's only like 11 o'clock or something. And I went in over there, and David was over there witnessing to the policeman that he went to church and everything. And that was the only time that he ever got in any kind of...
that we know about.
That we know about, yeah.
Yeah, and he told Brian, he said, Brian, it must have been of the Lord, because I was able to witness to some. And Brian looked at him and he said, David, do you think that possibly that was not the best time for you to be witnessing to people when you're in jail? David, where do I begin? A short one is, when he was a little guy, they had a pastor's appreciation day, and they had us get this big sheet cake and bring it home. And I was in charge of this big sheet cake for the whole church. The next morning I get up to take it to church, and there are tracks all the way through the icing. David had taken his finger, and he had gone all over the icing to lick the icing off. So I had to patch that up. But that isn't one of the favorites. One of my favorites, to show you how seriously David was about his high school education, number one, he took every shop course they had available. He took nothing that he had to study for. Came time for his graduation. One of the first graduations outside at Zion Benton High School. They had the seats down there on the field, and audience is sitting up here, and they do the program, and the kids all march out. And then all of a sudden, you see this one kid running back in. He had left his diploma on the seat of his chair, and of course, it was David. He cared that much about it. Well, next morning he gets up. He said, Mom, I've been thinking about it, and I think I want to go to college. I said, crap, David, you're not ready to go to college. I said, I'll make you a deal. I said, you go to CLC for 2 years. And I said, if you do well, then we'll talk about a 4-year college. And he went, and CLC is one of the best things that ever happened to him. They took him under their arm. They tutored him. They got him through. He graduated on the dean's list. He did beautifully there. Went on and went to Carthage. Now has his master's. He's a teacher. And when he started on to get his teaching degree, he said, I want to be able to help kids that were like I was. Kids that and they did, that the administration throws their hands up and gives up on them. He said, I want to teach those kids. I've been very proud of that. One other memory. One time, 2 other memories. When David was in college, he was very lonely. He wanted a girlfriend so badly. He wanted a girlfriend. And he would come, and you'd have to, if you could picture, or if you could hear David flopping up those stairs in his bare feet, he would flop up the stairs in his bare feet. He'd be out with his friends. I'd be in bed. He'd come upstairs and he'd say, Mama, I'm so lonely. He said, I want a girlfriend. And I'd say, David, I said, let's pray about it. Let's pray for her right now. God has someone for you. Let's pray for her. And he'd kneel down by the bed, and he and I would pray for whomever God had for him, that she would get a good night's sleep, and that her day tomorrow would go well, and that God would keep her safe. And that prayer was answered when Senya and he started dating, and she's been a good helpmate for him. Another dream David had one time. He loved his grandpa. Oh, how he loved his grandpa Harry. And he had a dream one time, and he came and he told me, he said, Mama, he said, I was asleep, and he said, the rapture happened. And he said, we were going up to heaven, and I looked, and there was Daddy, and there was Grandpa with his mom and his dad. And he looked down and he said, see, Mom, I told you my family would be coming. He said, we were all going up. So that's my boy.
He's a good man.
He's a great man.
One of the best. Let's talk about your baby girl.
Oh, my Sarah Pooh.
to, or you?
No, I can do it. Getting Sarah into this world was not an easy job. It was a very difficult pregnancy. And I had an idiot doctor. And it was a clinic of doctors. There were 3 of them. And there was one that I did not want to be there. You had to take whoever was on call when you went into labor, and I didn't want it to be him. But Considine was the one that was on call. So I get to the hospital after I had been, bedridden for 2 or 3 months. I couldn't even get out of bed. And they had told me on one of the visits, they had said, we feel that something's going to go wrong with this delivery. We're not sure what, but don't worry, we're going to be ready for it. We're going to be ready for it. So I went into the hospital, and thank God I was doing the birth naturally. And they took me into the delivery room. Wendell wasn't allowed to go. And Considine wasn't there. And he wasn't there. And they said, the cord's crimped. We got to get this baby out. What are we going to do? And I said, I want Wendell in here. Well, he can't come in here. I said, I want him here. I want him here now. And I was going hysterical, so they let him come in. Finally, Considine shows up. He had, instead of, when they notified him I was in, knowing the history that I was in labor, his child had to have a tire fixed on his bicycle. And instead of coming to the hospital, he chose to take that bicycle to the bicycle store and get the tire fixed. So Sarah was born, and she didn't breathe right away. The cord had been crimped. She was 10 pounds, 12 and a half ounces. Delivered naturally, thank God, because if I had had any kind of painkiller, she would not have made it. She did not breathe. Did not breathe. She started, after they took her into the nursery, she started having seizures. Dr. Weinberg, who had been our pediatrician since Brian was born, came into my hospital room, and he said, Ruthie, he said, there's trouble. He said her blood was so thick that her heart could not pump it. She was without oxygen. She had seizures. He said, I'm not real sure she's going to make it through the night. But if she does, there are going to be serious complications. He said, they're going to be transferring her to Evanston. He said, well, let me tell you something. He said, in Evanston, they're trained. Their neonatal unit is trained to take care of these babies no matter what. If they should happen to succumb, they're trained to bring them back unless you have an order in place. And he said, there's more to life than just breathing. And he said, I do not feel that if anything happened to Sarah, there would be more to her life. He said, and it's up to you, as her mother, to call Evanston and tell them, if it is your choice, that they do not do any resuscitation on Sarah if she should not make it. I said, no, I said, I wouldn't want her to go through that. So he sat there behind me, this doctor, and literally held my hand while I made the call and told him I do not want her to be revived if anything happens. And he said, I'm not sure she's going to make it through the night. You might want to call your husband, different ones. The first people I called were Marie and Jack Gray, who were our pastors. Marie answered, and all I said was, Marie, it's the baby. She said, we'll be there, and she hung up. Then I called Wendell, because I knew Marie and Jack had a longer way to get there. Then I called Wendell. Mother was at the house to take care of the other kids, and he came. They closed off the entire nursery, and it was just Sarah and us. That's all that was there, just Sarah and us. They just closed it off. Sister Evelyn Zingmark was pastoring. She was this big woman who pastored the Waukegan church. She loved Wendell. She walked by and she said, what's the matter with my boy? That's the kind of voice she had. Went back to my room. I had been up the whole night, sitting, just holding her hand. They had one nurse who was just pumping oxygen into Sarah. As big as she was in an isolette. So I went back to my room. Marie went with me. I had just settled into the room, and they started saying Code Blue, nursery Code Blue. And the nurse came and she said, "It's your baby." And I'm trying to get my slippers on. I'm trying to get up. Marie bent down. I'll never forget it. She was such a humble lady, bent down and literally put the shoes on my feet and walked me down to the nursery. In the meantime, Jack was there with Wendell, Pastor Gray. And when they said that her heart had stopped, they came out and asked Wendell if he wanted last rites to be done for her. And he said no, but we believe in divine healing. And I want my pastor to pray for her. And later Jack said he was never so scared in all his life. But he reached in and he put his hands on her. And he prayed for her, and that little heart of hers started beating. Started right up beating, and by the time I got down there, her heart was beating. She was still alive. Evanston sent down a huge thing to pick up this little baby of ours and take her down to their neonatal unit. But they said, before she goes, we want you to bring the other kids in so that they know that they really truly had a sister, that she lived, she breathed, she was real. They need to know that. I have pictures of them. They brought the kids in. David has on this mask and this gown that's dragging on the floor. They're standing around looking at Sarah. And then they left, and they took Sarah. And after they took Sarah, I went back to my room. Wendell wasn't going to let them take his daughter without following in the car. And he was going through the red lights with them. He was right behind that ambulance. Finally, they pulled over and they said, "Sir, you can't do that. You're going to get a ticket. This is the address. This is where you can't follow us like that." I went to my room. My mom and dad were there. Daddy was crying because Sarah was named after his mom, and he was just having a hard time with his grandchild being like that. And I told him, I said, I really want you to go. I'm the kind of person, I want to be by myself. I don't want anybody here. And Dad said, well, he said, that may be. He said, we're not going to say a word. He said, we're not leaving you alone. He said, we'll be right here, but we won't say a word. You can pretend you're by yourself. We're not going to say a word. Well, unbeknownst to us, Pastor Hanners, who pastored Mom and Dad at the time, had come into the hospital as Jack was leaving to see Sarah. And he told us at Sarah's wedding, Sarah wanted Pastor Hanners to do her wedding. And he told Sarah this at the wedding. He said he was getting on the elevator as Jack was getting off the elevator. And he said, Pastor Gray looked at him, he said, don't you dare build up their hopes. He said, don't you dare tell them everything's going to be all right. But he did. He came up and he said, I just knew it was going to be okay. So I was there the next day. I went down to the shower room, locked the door, went in, and I screamed. I turned the shower on, and I screamed, and I yelled, and I cried. And then I went back to my room, put my clothes on, and got ready to go take care of my baby. An idiot doctor came in. First, Dr. Weinberg came in. Then Considine came in. Considine said, you can't leave. I haven't discharged you. I said, you know what? I said, if you want to call the police to tie me down, you do it. But I said, that's the only way you're going to get me to stay here. Then he said something about, well, if you hadn't been diabetic, and Dr. Weinberg said, listen to me. He said, she did everything she was supposed to. You're the one that screwed up. You're the one that wasn't there. With that, Considine left, and I got ready, and Wendell picked me up, left the hospital, went home. When one of us girls had a baby, we would get a dozen roses from Daddy. Just from Daddy. That's all they were, just from Daddy, a dozen red roses. And as I'm going home, I'm thinking, well, she didn't even get her red roses from Daddy. I walk in, and they're on the kitchen table. Or a dozen red roses. Yeah. We went upstairs to what was her nursery. It was all ready for her. had her clothes all laid out and everything. And I went upstairs. And I kind of broke down a little bit, and my mother was there. And the one thing she said, which was the kindest thing she'd ever said to me, was, if I would take this all away from you and take care of it myself. And then I went down to see my Sarah. And I would sit with her all day. And I would hold her. And I went in one day and they had tubes down her throat and down all over. And I said, oh, what is this? They said, well, we know she cannot suck. And they said, we don't want you to be disappointed, so we're feeding her. I said, take those tubes out. We can't do that this hour. I said, if she will suck, if I can get her to take a bottle, will you take him out? They said, yes, but you've got to promise us you won't get hysterical. I said, I'm not going to get hysterical. So they gave me a little bitty bottle to give to Sarah. And I picked her up and I put that bottle in her mouth and she went, and it was gone. I said, excuse me, can I have another bottle, please? And the tubes came out. I went to see her every day. I'd stay there 12. Wendell would take me on his way to work. He'd pick me up after he was done, 12, 14 hours. I'd sit. There had been a death in the family. We had no adults there. So Brian and Tracy and David, I would make sure they were locked in the house. Brian was a teenager. They were locked in the house with food. I would go stay with Sarah, and then we would come to pick her up. Wendell would bring me home. I'd go upstairs to try and get comfortable because I wasn't doing real good physically. And I'd get comfortable on that king-size bed and they'd say, okay, kids, I'm ready. And they'd come running up those stairs and they'd jump on the bed while Wendell went out and got us food for supper. And then we got to bring her home. And the nurse, the kids all dressed up in their Sunday best to come get their little sister. And I can remember Dr. Addie Adams, who was in charge of Sarah down there, saying they all felt sorry for us because they had wanted us to put her in a home, not to even bring her to our house. And Brian said, Mom, you bring her home and I'll take care of her. There was no way she was not going to come into our family. They were all dressed up, and Dr. Abby said, she said, we felt so bad for you because we knew the outcome was not going to be good and that you were going to have to make that decision, and we were all sad. Well, I want to tell you something. That little girl walked at 9 months. She potty trained herself at 18 months. She started going to the potty all on her own and has been amazing ever since. God has blessed her, and for the longest time, you could ask any member of our family, do you believe in miracles? And they'd say, oh yeah. We've got one of them at our house. And she has never, ever disappointed me. She has been an amazing person. She married an amazing man. She has amazing children. She has an amazing home. And when she got her college degree, I sent a copy of it down to Evanston to Dr. Abby Adams. I wanted them to know that their work had not been in vain. And it was really amazing because in this neonatal unit, they had all these little bitty babies, itty bitty babies, itty bitty babies. And then there was Sarah, 10 pounds, 12 and a half ounces. And they'd go around and they'd pick up all these little babies and they would literally come to Sarah. And I can remember this one nurse, she bent down to pick her up and she went, because she was not a 2-pound baby. But God blessed her. He's blessed her whole life. I have memories of her stubbornness, her daddy trying to pick her up. She's just been amazing.
Oh yeah, tell that story, Papa. Trying to pick Aunt Sarah up from school.
Oh, yes. She always listened to her mother, completely. And this one day, Ruth was working and Sarah was in school. And it had been raining a little bit or something. And Ruth calls me at home and she said, why don't you go over and pick up Sarah at school when school's out? And so I did. I got in the car and I drove over there and I waited and I saw her walk out and walk down she was walking down the sidewalk. I didn't think she saw me, But anyway, she kept walking and I pull over beside her going down the sidewalk and I said, why don't you come get in the car, I'll take you home. Didn't say anything, just shook her head no. And I kept, kind of going slow down the road and about maybe 3 blocks from the school, 3-4 blocks. And she kept walking down and I said, Sarah, come on, get in the car, we'll go home. So I get on down, and here comes this nice lady, and she comes over to Sarah, and she said, "Is that man bothering you? Is he trying to pick you up?" She said, and she came over to me at the car, and she said, "Are you trying to pick her up?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I'm her father." And and she looked at me, "Oh, okay." So Sarah wouldn't get in the car. She walked all the way home. It was kind of raining, and so I just kind of went slow, and we got home.
You know, you are what you are, and you don't change that much as you grow up. So she's in college now. 9/11 happens. And she's down at what college did she go to?
Trinity.
She's down at Trinity by the airport, kind of closer to the airport than here, and I'm at work, and I called Wendell and I said, "Go get Sarah. I don't want her down there. 9/11 happened. We don't know what's going to happen to the country. I want her at home." He drives all the way down to Trinity to get her, and she refused to come home. Same Sarah. She would not get in that car and come home. She wanted to be a part of what was going on. So, yeah, she's been a joy. She's been a joy.
So you guys have 4 kids. Did you guys always plan to have a bigger family?
If we could have afforded it, I would have had more.
Really?
But
It's expensive.
Sarah being born, well, back then it wasn't as bad, and Sarah being born was traumatic. It was a difficult time. And I can remember my dad told Wendell, he said, "You either get that vasectomy done for you or I'll do it myself." He said, "She's not going through this again."
Wow.
So he kind of took that option away.
Yeah. But you guys had, the 2 boys, 2 girls.
And we lost one. I had one miscarriage.
Yeah.
I would love to have had more, but it was a different time back then. And even at that point, we knew that 4 was our limit. But if it had been years earlier where we could have afforded it, if it had been back in the 50s, I would love to have had more children. I enjoyed having them. I just enjoyed them. They were pistols, every one of them. They were pistols, but it was fun.
What do you think, Papa?
Oh, I think we had the greatest family you could ever have. We had 2 boys, 2 girls, and yes, if we could have had more, if we'd have had, more, it would have been wonderful too. I don't see anyone that has a family any greater than ours.
And if we would have had more, the compromise would have been, I would have had to have gone to work.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a family value of mine that I wanted to raise my kids. I didn't want somebody else to raise my kids. I wanted to raise my kids. Times were different back then. And I wanted to be the at-home mom. And so the option was no more kids.
And we sort of grew up with our family.
Yeah.
That was fun. That was very entertaining at times and very rough at times. I remember one time that Tracy ran away from home and she ran to the corner, and some lady that knew us, knew her, said, "Tracy, where are you going?" Said, "Well, I run away from home." I said, "Well, you live right down there." "Yeah, but my dad and mom said I can't cross the street." So we had some wonderful times with our children.
She ran away because I dared to tell her no. I dared to tell her she couldn't have something. "I'm going to run away from home. I said, "You know what, Tracy? I think you're right." I said, "You do deserve a better mom and dad. If we're not exactly what you want and you think you can get some," I said, "You know what? That's what you should do." Well, she got out her little suitcase and she threw her little clothes in it and she stomped out that door and walked down to the corner where she couldn't cross the street. She was a doodle, I gotta tell you.
What would you say your proudest accomplishment in life is?
Our family is the proudest accomplishment that we have ever, in my opinion, we have ever made. We have a great family. They have we have wonderful grandchildren, 10 grandchildren, 2 great grandchildren, most beautiful grandchildren that I've ever seen anywhere. Smart and very intelligent. I think that is the most important part of living is through your grandchildren and the great grandchildren. I think that's a gift to the grandparents, where you can have them, you can take care of them, then you can send them home.
You know, you will never hear me, and you probably have never heard me say ditto to anything that Wendell has said. However, I would have to agree. The proudest thing is family first. This family of ours, the pride I feel when you're all together and I just sit back and watch you. And the pride I feel that you're good people and that you're loving people. And mainly the fact that the majority of you are kind people. I have told Amanda repeatedly, sweetheart, you're kind. I'm not kind. I'm very straightforward, very logical, very in your face with what I think is right and wrong. But my grandchildren are kind. They're good people. I look at them and I'm in awe. And I'm in awe of the parenting that goes on, that our children do to our grandchildren. And now that our grandchild does with her children. It's not just a gift to the family, but it's a gift to the nation to have a family of good people. Now, do these good people always agree politically? Hell no. I mean, we have got to the point where we have had to ban political talk at the dinner table because it would get so out of hand. There's a new age coming. There's a new day coming. We're aware of that, but there are some of us that need to hold on to the old just a little bit longer. But I would have to say, without hesitation, the greatest achievement that Wendell and I have done is raising this amazing family we have. We love each and every one of them, no matter where they are, no matter how they feel about us. Doesn't matter. We love them anyway. They're our family.
Talk to me about your house.
We had been looking for a different home for 2 or 3 years because we had been robbed. Our neighborhood had gone down. It was just not where we wanted to be at that time. We couldn't find anything. One year we're walking to the Labor Day parade. Mom had come down for Labor Day, and we passed this old house with big trees around it. It had a great big for sale sign on it. And I'm like, oh wow, we need to look at that. So I got a hold on Labor Day of the lady that had it listed, made her open it up that day for us to come and look through it. And it was something. I mean, it smelled to high heaven. Ceilings were falling down. Trees needed to be cut down. I mean, it was bad. And I remember coming down those dirty stairs and thinking, wow. And I remember Wendell saying, oh my God, I think she's serious. And I was. And I said, I want Corky Otterson to look at the roof. I want my dad to look at the house, and we'll put an offer in. So Daddy came and looked at it, and he was as mesmerized by it as I was. He could just see all the projects he could do and everything. Mother could see all the cleaning she would do. So he came up with the price for the house. And it was like $5,000 below what they were asking. And he put the offer in. And I can remember Doris Wiedekind saying, are you sure that's what you want? And he's not going to. Dad said, that's it. Not going to put it any more on. So he put the offer in. The man had 3 days. He had picked this house up for back taxes. And he thought this house would go for something like it did down in Chicago. Well, ain't going to happen. And so Daddy put that price in. That man waited till the very last minute of the 3 days. And he told our realtor, he said, are you sure they're not going to come up higher? She said, look, they're not going to come up higher. Winter is coming. You can't let that house sit empty another winter. And so he accepted the offer. And that was the beginning. Mom and Dad were both retired. We bought this house. I mean, Daddy told me he didn't think he could even save the Rose room. I said, but Daddy, that's my favorite room. All right, kid, I'll see what I can do. We had 2 apartments. We had to get those ready. We had another house on Gilead that we had to live in and had to pay the payments on. We had the payments on this. We needed to get the apartments ready. It was a stretch. Any way you looked at it, it was a stretch that we probably never should have had done if we had a brain in our head. But we went ahead and we plunged through, and every morning, we had no kitchen. And every morning, Mom would get up and make a pot meal, and they would come and they would work on the house. I'd take the kids to school. They'd work on the house until the kids got out of school and came here to the house. Wendell would go, in the meantime, one of the cars had given out, so Wendell would ride the train down to the store, walk from the train back to here, work all night by himself because I was doing Princess House, and I would take the kids home from here, get ready, go do a Princess House show. We did that for 6 months until we just couldn't go anymore. And all we really got done was we got the apartments ready to rent, and we got the house clean because an old man had lived in here with cats and dogs that he didn't let out for any reason whatsoever, and he'd throw those lids out the window and they'd pee and piss and do all this in the house. Mom would take her bucket of spick and span and she'd throw it on a floor, and that odor would come up. It was horrendous. You wouldn't believe what it was like. You wouldn't believe the work we put into it. You know what? That was 37 years ago. And now I cannot imagine living anywhere else. I cannot imagine leaving this old house. Other people may, after we're gone out of here, other people may live in this house. No other family will ever occupy this house like we have. My mother came to live here her final year. She died in her bed upstairs. Daddy used to come here and work every day. He loved coming here and being at this house. And Brian came from Atlanta when he was sick and discouraged and didn't have any place to go. He came back to this house. David wouldn't leave this house to go to college. He commuted to college. Sarah loved this house. Tracy has come to this house with her family to live when she had nowhere else to go and to save money for a house, her and her companion, her husband. Sarah and Steve lived here 5 years. They brought Matthew home to this house. They brought the twins home to this house. It has just been beyond a house. This has truly, truly, truly been a home. It has been our home. It has been our family home. I think we're one of the few families that really have a family home that the whole family recognizes as let's go to Nana and Papa's. So this house has just been very special to us.
Yes, it has. It took a lot of work, for in the beginning. I think we put about 80 gallons of paint in the house before we even could move in. We had to do a lot of different things for the house. Windows, everything. Our first heating bill was over $800 for that a month. I mean, was it a month or every 2 months? But
That was every month.
That was
month.
back in the 80s?
Yeah.
$800.
$800 to $1,000 for heat,
and
plus 2 house payments.
So it was very frustrating,
Scary.
for the first 6 to 8 months. Then we started to living in it, and the family started to enjoying some of it outside. The grandkids made forts out in the area out there by the trees.
Abby played in the woods.
Abby played in the woods. She had
Amanda climbed the tree.
Amanda climbed the trees. It was just a good place over the period of years. Not everybody thinks it's as great as we do, but we do have a lot of room.
But we don't really care.
Yeah. We do enjoy living here. We have no neighbors right around the corner, or anything like that we have to worry about or anything.
It's our home.
Our home.
I mean, as your grandchild, I have memories of being here on Thanksgiving, and right after dinner, as soon as it got dark, we would all go outside and you would have your Clark Griswold moment, lighting up the house, because you had already put the lights on the house.
Yes.
And walking to the ducks to feed the ducks, and the woods, playing kickball in your side yard. And you're right. I mean, when I think of my childhood and I think of a home base, that is this house.
Yeah, it is for so many, and it's been a safe haven for so many. I remember my mother. My mother was not fond of me, and she used to say, "You're just like your dad." And I'd say, "Yeah, you didn't like him either." So, this was our relationship. But I always wanted her to feel safe and comfortable. I knew her background. I knew that was a feeling she'd never had. I knew she was absolutely terrified of a nursing home. So her and Daddy both knew I had a place for them. Well, it so happened that Daddy went first and Mama was left. And I remember getting that one apartment upstairs ready. I worked for a heating company, and I had Kern come in and put her own heating thermostat up there and to fix that, so she controlled the heat on that side because she liked it so hot. I wanted her to be comfortable. Well, I took her up one time. She was here, and I said, Mom, this is yours. This is your apartment. She said, I'm not ready. I don't want to come here. I'll let you know when I'm ready. I'm like, okay, whatever. But it's here for you whenever you're ready. A couple of years passed, and went up there to get her one time, and it had snowed. Now, Daddy was always good to the Boy Scouts. He always donated to them, supported them. He was proud of being a Boy Scout. So it pulled into the driveway. There was a blizzard brewing. She had had that neuralgia where she couldn't wear anything on her shoulder. And I pulled in the driveway, snow's flying. There are all these little Boy Scouts. They look like little elves, and they're all over that yard. They're shoveling the driveway, and they're shoveling the sidewalk, and they're taking care of Mr. Morgan's wife. I went in and I said, Mom, are you about ready to come? She said, I'm ready. It's time to go. We had one weekend to get it ready.
Yeah.
Wendell stayed up with me till 1 and 2. We painted, we moved furniture, we fixed it up. And then Sarah and Tracy and I went up and got her, and the boys took Brian's truck and got some of her furniture, and I brought it down here. And I remember when I took her out of that house that she loved, I thought she would cry, but she didn't. She got in the car. She wasn't eating well, and I said, Mom, you got to eat something. What do you want? She said, I want some Wendy's French fries.
Yeah.
I said, okay, we'll take you. So I went into Wendy's, and I told them, I said, I need some hot, fresh fries for this woman. It's all she's eating. And they made up a whole batch of fresh fries for her. She had her French fries, and I brought her. I said, now I need for you to sit in the living room. I got a couple of things to do. And Tracy and I went upstairs, and we hung her family pictures above her bed like she had them at the other house, and got it all spick and span, and it was beautiful. It was done in blues and peaches, and she had a lazy boy and a TV, and had her own little kitchen. It was beautiful. It really turned out nice. Took her up the stairs, and I said, Mom, I said, open the door. This is your new home. She opened the door, and that's when she cried. She stood there, and she cried. She said, this is so beautiful. Thank you so much. And she spent her last year there. This house has just been everything to everybody. And it's just not anything that can be duplicated.
One of the things that I remember, the most was when Abby and Amanda would spend the night on a Saturday night, when they were young, little, and would get up in the morning, and they would still have their little nightgowns on and we would go up here to the donut shop, and I'd set them up on the counter, and they could pick out any of the donuts that they wanted, and then we would get those and bring those home, and we did that quite a bit. They would come, quite often. So when we had the twins, Morgan and Miranda, they spent the night. The first time they spent the night here was a Saturday night, and Papa got them up Sunday morning, and we went over to the donut shop, and I told them at the donut shop, I said, probably 20, 25 years ago, I brought my granddaughters here, and I said, these are our great-granddaughters.
No, they're not.
The youngest granddaughter.
Yeah, I'm sorry. They're granddaughters from our youngest daughter, and I said, I want them to have their choice of donuts, Yeah. So set them up on the counter, and I think we took a picture someplace here. And, that's what I remember a lot, is the kids here, they did enjoy the house. It was big, but they enjoyed it. And most of them.
Can't please everyone.
And but we've enjoyed it. This is our family. This is family home. We have had Thanksgivings, Christmases, and
Easters. Oh, I love the Easters.
Everything like that in this house, and it's been good for us.
If you could have one day to go back and live, just to relive it, you don't change anything, just get the chance to see the people have the same experiences, what would you live?
There was a day when I was just a kid. Daddy and I would go fishing. I was his fishing buddy. And we'd be out fishing all day long, just him and me, in his little 2-man rowboat that he made with his horse-and-a-half-power motor. And on the way home, we would stop at the A&W root beer stand in Union Grove, there on Highway 11, and get us each a big frosty mug of root beer because we didn't take anything to drink and we were thirsty. I would love to go back. And spend a day with him again.
Just the two of you?
Just the two of us. And go have a great big mug of frosty root beer. A&W. That would be my day.
What about you, Papa? What day would you want to relive?
I think the week before we got married, we had found this apartment in Kenosha. And Ruth had told me, said, bring your clothes, you know. So I brought the clothes, and I think I had 2 pair of slacks and 2 shirts. So maybe I, could have had 3 pair of pants and 4 shirts.
But you had to wear one.
But, I'd like to relive that time for this reason. It's been the most wonderful 56 years of my life. It began 56 years ago. I don't remember a whole lot before that, but I certainly remember a lot after that. And to relive that time and be able to go on for another 56 years with this wonderful person, that would be a dream come true.
Advice would you give now that you wish you would have been given when you were younger?
When you're young, especially as young as we were teenagers when we got married. I was barely 20 when I had my first child. You think life is going to go on forever. It's just going to stretch out there. You're never going to get older. You're never going to retire. You're just going to go through life. The advice I would give young people, the advice I would give anybody that I wish I had had when I was little is to start saving for your retirement at the minute you start working. Don't think that retirement is not going to happen. Don't think that old age is not going to happen, because it is. So my advice to anyone that I was not given, because it was a different day and age back then. Money was different back then. Phones were different back then. Communication was different back then. But with today's knowledge would be to hook yourself up with your own personal financial planner from the very, very beginning, and then sit back, enjoy the ride, because you know you've done what you're supposed to do and you're going to be just fine. We're very fortunate. It's worked out for us. We've done all right, but not because we've always made the right decisions. So I would hope that my family would make right decisions, and from the ones I've talked to, for the most part, they are. And I'm proud of them for that. But it would have to do because your quality of the life you give your family, in part, is determined by the financial security you give them. Love comes first. Acceptance, unconditional love, support. These are all things that come first. But you do have to mix the finances in there with them.
What about you, Papa?
There was one piece of advice that we were sort of given when we got married, or before we got married, by Ruth's aunt, and that was, you never let the day go by and you go to bed angry at each other. was hard to do sometimes, and I think, we got through it really, really well.
And sometimes we sat up all night and didn't go to bed.
Yeah, sometimes we just sat there. But if you let anger inside you, then it tends to build. So that's the advice that I would give.
Life is hard sometimes. What advice would you give for getting through those hard times?
Stick together, climb that hill. When you get to the top, you will be satisfied.
I used to say, I don't know how people start to raise children without a faith in God. When you come to those hard times, it's only that faith that God has it in control. No matter what the outcome is, He's still in control, that gives you the courage to go on. I've told the family repeatedly, there are those things in life that you can go around. There are some problems you can go over, go under, but there are those things in life you've got to go right through the middle of them to get to the other side. And it's how you go through the middle. Keep your integrity, keep your conscience, and keep your faith in God at all times. Believe with your whole heart that God has you in His hands and that your life is under His control. And that'll get you through the hard times.
How do you hope everyone will remember you?
I hope everyone will remember me as a good person, good grandfather, good father. Love to be with the family, love to go to the basketball games, love to enjoy sports with the family. Just in general, as a fun-loving person.
Well, I can tell you how I don't want to be remembered. Nobody ever better say, oh, she was such a sweet person. Don't you ever say that about me. I'm not sweet. I don't want to be sweet. However, I want to be remembered as kind, loving, intelligent, and a person of integrity. I know I'm logical and I know I'm direct. But you know what? There are those people who love me in spite of that. And so if I'm remembered as being a good, kind, loving person of integrity, that would make me happy.
Well, now really, when we go back then to falling in love, and say it's crazy, falling. You see? We don't say rising into love. There is in it the idea of the fall. And it goes back, as a matter of fact, to extremely fundamental things. That there is always a curious tie at some point between the fall and the creation. Taking this ghastly risk is the condition of there being life. You see, for all, the life is an act of faith and an act of gamble. The moment you take a step, you do so on an act of faith because you don't really know that the floor is not going to give under your feet. The moment you take a journey, what an act of faith. The moment you enter into any kind of human undertaking and relationship, what an act of faith. See, you've given yourself up. But this is the most powerful thing that can be done. Surrender. See? And love is an act of surrender to another person. Total abandonment. I give myself to you. Take me. Do anything you like with me. See? So, that's quite mad. Because you see, it's letting things get out of control. All sensible people keep things in control. Watch it, watch it, watch it. Security, vigilance, watch it. Police, watch it. Guards, watch it. Who's going to watch the guards? So, actually, therefore, the course of wisdom, what is really sensible, is to let go, is to commit oneself, to give oneself up, and that's quite mad. So we come to the strange conclusion that in madness lies sanity. But when you fall in love, it's a much more serious involvement. You just cannot forget this person. You feel miserable when not in their presence. You're always yearning, let's get see more of each other, let's get together, we're completely entangled. And then you see, you've actually a kind of what I will call spiritual element has been introduced. Falling in love is a thing that strikes like lightning and is therefore extremely analogous to the mystical vision. We don't know how really people attain the mystical vision. But as yet we are not clear as to why it comes about. And if there is any method of attaining it, the best one is probably to give up the whole idea of getting it. But you see, it is completely unpredictable. And so it is, in that way, like falling in love, capricious, and therefore crazy. But if you should be so fortunate as to encounter either of these experiences, it seems to me to be a total denial of life to refuse it.